A few years back, my family went to Universal for Christmas. It was around that time that they just opened up their new replica of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and my friend and I both wanted to go. Neither of us were loaded enough to stay at the resort inside the park, but we were able to get rooms in the same cheaper hotel just a few miles away. As tainted as my memory of that weekend is, I clearly recall that the day we spent roaming through the park together was a blast. Everything was festively decorated and covered in snow, a big deal for Florida boys. After a long day of walking through the park and visiting all the attractions, pigging out on various chocolatey culinary concoctions at the chocolate factory, and coercing our parents into buying a bunch of gifts, the sun was setting on our Christmas vacation. However, we still had one more night at the hotel. Our parents had planned this in advance and had gotten a little too drunk to drive all the way home. While our parents were passed out in bed, my friend and I couldn't sleep. Our minds were buzzing with all the things we'd done that day, and we didn't want it to end just yet. We were dueling each other on a mobile game when he messaged me. "Yo, I saw a gym on the way up. You want to race on the treadmills?" My feet were still sore from all the walking, but it seemed like a good way to blow off some steam. Sure, but how do we get in?" "Don't worry about it. I'll use my room key. Just meet me on my floor." That meant I'd have to sneak out and go downstairs, but that wouldn't be hard. My parents were out cold. The only trouble I had was finding where they put the room key so I could get back in unnoticed. It took several tense minutes of digging through my mother's purse in the dark, but I finally found it. I carefully opened the door and slipped out, heading quickly for the elevator. I only got a few steps in before I heard somebody walking behind me. I stopped and turned around, and immediately got stranger danger vibes. There was a man standing in the hallway half dressed as Santa Claus, and by that, I mean he was half naked. All he had on were the boots, the fake beard, and a stocking cap, along with the most strange pair of stained briefs I've ever seen. Other than that, he carried a flimsy red sack that didn't look very full at all. I immediately spun back around and started power walking to the elevator. I heard him shuffling behind me, trying to catch up. When I got to the elevator, I spammed the down arrow. I knew that wouldn't make it go any faster, but my panicked brain was willing to try anything. By the time the doors finally opened, I could feel the creep right behind me, breathing down my neck.
"Well, aren't you going in?"
"You can go first."
"No problem, my little angel."
I stepped aside and let him through. As he boarded the elevator, he sang,
"All I want for Christmas is you."
Then, he retrieved something from his limp sack and stretched his arm through the doorway, holding out an unwrapped candy cane. There was a bunch of red lint from the sack stuck onto it, but not wanting to aggravate him for any reason, I took it without any intention of eating it. Finally, he dropped his arm and cleared the doorway. We stared at each other for a few unbearable seconds, until at last the door slid closed and I was freed from his gaze. I didn't see him push any buttons, so I was worried he would open the doors and reappear at any second. To make sure I didn't run into him again, I took the stairs down to my friend's floor. But, of course, my woes were not done for the night. The first thing I saw when I opened the door into the hallway was my friend having a seizure. I dropped the candy cane and rushed to him, calling out for help. "Help! Help! Somebody call the cops! Help!" My friend was frothing at the mouth, his eyes pure white from rolling back into his head, thrashing violently despite all my attempts to calm him down. There was nothing I could do. It wasn't until he'd already gone limp and unresponsive that people finally emerged from their rooms to see what was going on. I'm no doctor, but I knew at that point he was already dead. Nobody ever talks about how people empty their bowels and bladder in their moment of death. I'm not a detective either, but I had a pretty good idea as to what had killed him. Clutched in his dying grip was the same kind of dusty, unwrapped candy cane that the half-naked Santa had given me. In the following months, I was subpoenaed to testify against that worthless turd of a man. And during my appearances in the court, I got to learn far more than I wanted to. The hotel security cameras had ample footage of the man stalking multiple people in the hallways and trying to offer them his candy canes, which he laced with some kind of extremely potent poison. No matter how many times he raved about it, I'll never understand his delusional motive. Something about bringing people closer together for Christmas by sending them all to heaven. I don't even care anymore. But the civil suit against the hotel is still going on. I hope my friend's parents get a fortune from that hotel for their negligence. Letting a man like that roam around their hallways during the holiday.
Ho 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 ho!
What the hell is going on out here? Why are there so many people here at 9 a.m.? It's Wednesday. I know I'm in high school, but don't you people have anything better to do? Don't you have jobs or something? Finally. What in the... Why is everyone right there? So much for showing up early for a good spot in line. Oh no. Is that really Santa Claus? What happened to him? It looks like he hasn't eaten since last year. Alright, I'm next. I can finally make a wish and get out of here. Has he even blinked this whole time? Why does he keep looking at me? Is he okay? What's going on? Why is that kid crying? Well, it's my turn, and I can't hold up the line. Here I go. Hi, Santa Claus.
Ho, 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 hello there, you dashing young man. Come take a seat on old Saint Nick's knee.
Okay. Is that okay?
Oh, did I say knee? I meant my lap. Come closer, boy. I'm hard of hearing.
Whoa, hey! Ow! What was that?
What was what?
In your pants, I felt something.
Oh, you mean that?
What are you talking about?
Shh, shh, shh. Come here, boy. That's Santa's secret weapon. I keep it on me so when I'm traveling through certain areas, I can use it on guests who make things exciting.
Huh? You mean like a knife or something?
Never mind that. It won't hurt you. Just take a sit on the other side of Santa's lap.
Okay.
Hurry up now. I don't have all day.
I'm sorry, Mr. Santa Claus. We can be quick, I promise.
Good, good. Now, what's your name, boy?
My name's Keith.
And Keith, do you know if you're on the nice list or the naughty list this year?
The nice list. I've been good.
Have you now? I'll be the judge of that. Now, tell me, what do you wish for Christmas?
Well, sir, it's about my girlfriend.
Bah! Your girlfriend? That doesn't sound like something a nice boy would have. What is it you want with this girlfriend?
I want to have...
That is a naughty wish, and it just puts you back on the naughty list.
No, please, I take it back. I'll wish for something else.
It's too late for that. There's no way that I can give you a present if you're on the naughty list. Elves, take him away.
Please, can't you make an exception? It's not like I wish for something bad. Please, please.
Enough! I can make your wish come true, but you have to stop causing a scene, all right?
Okay, I'm sorry, Santa. What can I do?
Wait a few hours until I clock out. Then meet me by my car in the parking lot. It's the one that looks like a magic sleigh. I'll take you to my, workshop.
Yes, thank you, Santa. I love you.
That's what I like to hear. Now smile for the camera.
Santa, is that you?
So, you found my car. Now get in the car already.
Can you see where we're going?
Of course I can. I live right around the corner. I know a shortcut too. Wanna see?
What? Whoa! What are you doing? Stop it! Slow down! Are you crazy? You're gonna crash! Please, stop!
You didn't think I kept my job by driving slow, did you?
Just slow down, for the love of God! Please!
Fine! but only because we're here.
What is wrong with you?
What's wrong with me? Nothing! How else do you think I made it to every house in the world in one night? Just get inside. Hurry up now, I don't want you to get cold. Go on.
Santa? Who had the fire going while you were gone?
Why, it was one of my elves, of course. You're so naive. There's no escape for you now. You're going to become real familiar with my North Pole. Get back here! I just want to show you where the compass points! Stay away from me, you freak! There's no way you're getting out of here until I let you. And that's not happening for a long time. So just stop making this harder on yourself. Ho, ho, ho! No, no, no!
Yet another tale of terror this year at the community mall. The beloved local Santa Claus we have all known and loved for years was arrested yesterday on multiple charges alleging rampant abuse of guests who visited the mall during the Christmas season.
This story was inspired by a disturbing mall incident that happened in Seattle. A 72-year-old former shopping mall Santa Claus was sentenced for his crimes after being accused of violating multiple mall guests while on the job. The man's name is Ronald Carroll McDonald. It was alleged that he wanted to be a mall Santa just so he could target younger customers under the radar. Ronald's son ended up asking the judge that his father be given the maximum sentence. Ronald was seen sobbing as he apologized to his family and to the relatives and friends of his victims in the courtroom. He later stated that he was quote-unquote Satan and not Santa, and that he knows everyone wishes him hell. Ronald pleaded guilty for his heinous actions and was sentenced accordingly. A few years ago, I worked at a mall as an elf in Santa's village. I had been hired from an agency just like all the other elves, photographers, security, and of course the mall Santa. The mall wouldn't hire anyone outside of the agency since background checks were very important to them. When I first started out, we had a really good team. Then the guy playing Santa quit and they brought in someone else. It was another cliche old chubby guy with a gray beard, but there was something really creepy and unsettling about this guy. His name was Arthur, and he always acted weird towards everyone. He didn't seem to know how to interact with people. Everyone felt very uncomfortable around him. But what I found weird was how Arthur acted worse towards females than he did guys. He was generally very rude to the women and a lot nicer to the guys. He was especially nice to me, which made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. Every time he spoke to me, he would compliment me about something and then look at me in the creepiest way.
Hey, darling, do you like candy canes?
No, I don't.
If you don't say yes, I'm gonna put you in my naughty list, darling.
Stop calling me that!
I even noticed he was nicer to the boys who sat on his lap. He would talk to them for way longer than the girls, and he seemed to give them special attention. It was all very strange. I mostly tried to avoid Arthur as much as I could, but it was difficult since we worked together all the time. I would always leave work as quickly as possible when my shift ended, so that he wouldn't have time to talk to me. After one shift, I was starting to leave when Arthur walked up to me.
Hey, can you do me a favor?
He gave me a creepy and awkward smile. I immediately wanted to leave, but I didn't think I could just ignore him.
What do you need?
Arthur then went into a whole story about how he had pulled some muscle in his back and couldn't drive home. Apparently, some kid had pulled his back from sitting in his lap. It all sounded like a lie to me, but I couldn't tell for sure.
So, do you think you could drive me home and help me up to my apartment?
I didn't want any part of it and I told him that I couldn't do it. I just wanted to leave, but he kept asking me over and over again. I refused him multiple times, but he wouldn't stop. He told me that he wouldn't be able to get home without my help, but I finally gave in and agreed to drive him home. The whole time we were in the car, I felt really creeped out. Arthur kept trying to make conversation, but it was all awkward and weird. I said as little as possible and just focused on getting to his apartment as fast as I could. Then at one point, he reached out and put his hand on my lap. It was creepy as hell. I was so grossed out and just wanted to get the whole thing over with. Finally, we got to his apartment. I just wanted to drop him off and get the hell out of there, but he insisted that he needed my help getting upstairs. So I reluctantly got out of the car and helped him up to his place. We moved really slowly, and Arthur leaned on me the whole time. We eventually made it to his door and I told him that I had to go. Arthur then told me to wait by the door for a second as he wanted to give me a gift for helping him. He then took out his phone and snapped a picture of me. Then he went to his room. I stood there confused and impatiently waited for him. Several minutes passed and Arthur still didn't come back. I began to feel sick to my stomach, and I had a very uneasy feeling that something was wrong, so I decided to leave. But then, as I started to turn around, Arthur appeared in the doorway out of nowhere. He was half naked, wearing only his underwear and holding a metal rod. He stared at me with a sick smile on his face, then swung the rod at me. I instinctively ducked as Arthur barely missed me and smashed the wall instead.
Help me!
I pushed Arthur to the floor and immediately ran down the hallway towards the elevator as fast as I could. I made it to the elevator and maniacally pushed the button for it to open. As I did, I looked behind me to see Arthur slowly slide out of his door. We made eye contact just as the elevator doors opened and he started running at me. I entered the elevator and frantically tried to close the door as Arthur got closer and closer. At the last second, the door closed just as Arthur smashed his rod into it. I could hear him slamming it against the door over and over again.
You can't run from me. I'm gonna smash your head open.
The elevator finally started to move downstairs and Arthur's beating grew quieter. As soon as I reached the first floor, I ran the hell out of the building. I didn't even think to get in my car. I just kept running and running, trying to put as much distance between me and Arthur as possible. When I had finally gotten far enough away, I entered a random store and called the cops. Arthur was later arrested at his apartment. It was later revealed that Arthur was a divorced man who was interested in younger men. He had allegedly killed multiple young guys in the greater Toronto area that were all around my age. He would then dismember them and put them in flower pots that he kept around his home. I remembered seeing several of them in his apartment. But what was even more disturbing is that Arthur took photos of his victims before and after killing them. That's when I remembered him taking a picture of me. I was completely traumatized but happy that I had gotten away before Arthur had taken the second picture. This story was inspired by a horrific case revolving around a man who worked as a shopping mall Santa Claus, who allegedly took the lives of 8 men and hid their remains inside plant pots that he would then rearrange from time to time. The culprit was a 70-year-old man named Bruce MacArthur, who preyed on multiple younger men in Canada's gay village and got away with a string of horrific crimes over 7 years. MacArthur would photograph his victims before and after they were taken out and kept a picture album as a grim trophy. When the police finally caught up with MacArthur, they found potential victim number 9 in his bed, with his before picture already taken. The man has since been sentenced and has been dubbed by the police as the serial killer Santa. What I'm about to tell you was the most terrifying experience that I have ever lived through. It's something that I will never forget. It happened years ago around Christmas. I have a wife and 1 son. They're the most important people in my life. I would do anything for them. That's what terrified me about that day the most. The thought that something might happen to one of them. My wife used to be friends with this woman named Janet. I got along with her husband okay, but we weren't really close. We only ever saw each other when our wives hung out. Janet and her husband had a son as well, so it was a nice situation. The 2 kids could play together while the adults talked, and we never had to get a babysitter. One year, Janet invited our family over for Christmas dinner. Unfortunately, her husband had to work late that night and couldn't attend, so it would just be me, my wife, Janet, and our 2 sons. I was surprised that Janet would invite us over on a night that her husband worked, but we of course accepted the invitation, so we headed over to Janet's house for dinner that night. It all went well at first. The food was delicious and we had pleasant conversations. Janet seemed slightly on edge, but I assumed that it was just the stress of the holiday getting to her. I knew I felt burnt out from all the preparations. Then something strange happened. I heard creaking noises coming from upstairs as we ate. I thought it was odd, since no one else was supposed to be home. I asked Janet about it, but she just said something about the house being old.
Oh, it creaks like that all the time. Don't worry about it.
It happened several more times during the meal. At one point, I could have sworn that I heard footsteps coming from upstairs, but I just ignored it based on what Janet had said. It had to just be the old house. Eventually, we finished dinner and headed to the living room. The kids went upstairs to play, while my wife Janet and I conversed and had some wine. Another hour went by without any event, and I realized that it was getting to be pretty late. I was just about to ask my wife if she was ready to leave, when suddenly, the scariest thing happened. I heard screaming coming from upstairs. My wife and I immediately started panicking, but Janet remained strangely calm. Then I realized it was our son. I immediately ran upstairs to see what was wrong, but when I got up there, all the lights were turned off for some reason. It was incredibly dark. The screaming had stopped, and I had no idea where it had come from. It was difficult to make out anything in the darkness. "Son, where are you?" He didn't answer. I really started to panic then. I ran through the dark hallway, checking different rooms. I couldn't find my son anywhere. Then I saw some light peeking out from under a closed door. I frantically opened the door and barged into the room. And I couldn't believe what I saw. My son was lying on the floor with a large man dressed as Santa hovering over him. My son looked scared to death. The man was dressed up like Santa with the wig, beard, hat, and boots, but he was in underwear. It was terrifying. What the hell is going on? The man didn't say anything. He just stared at me from behind the fake beard and wig. Then he made a move like he was going to attack me. I quickly pushed him out of the way and grabbed my son. He started crying as I escorted him downstairs in a total panic. I told my wife to get our stuff together and then started cussing at Janet. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She seemed confused about what was happening. I asked her why she would lie about her husband being at work. I knew she had to be in on the whole thing. Janet just stared at me and my wife gauntly and didn't say anything. As a matter of fact, she had this disturbing grin on her face. My family and I were horrified. We got out of that house and drove home as fast as we could. My son was still in shock and crying. I still couldn't believe what happened either. We knew that family. My wife had been friends with Janet for ages. It didn't make any sense. My family found it incredibly disturbing that Janet would pretend that her husband was at work, while he was actually hiding upstairs the whole time. It explained everything though. That was why Janet seemed strange the whole time. The creaking noises that I heard were obviously him moving around. The most horrifying thing was what her husband intended to do to our son. And why was he dressed as Santa? On the ride home, my wife got a text from Janet that said,
"Is everything okay?"
We were totally disgusted. The family had to be completely insane. Why was she still playing innocent? My wife texted back and told Janet that her and her husband were sick and needed help. Janet left it on read, and that was the last time they ever spoke. Janet hasn't responded since. My wife completely cut her off as a friend, of course. We still couldn't understand how they got along so well for such a long time. We tried to report them to the police, but they said that it was just their word against ours. There was nothing they could do. My son was in shock for a long time, but he eventually got over it mostly. I, for one, am still scared. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't made it to that room in time. I just know that there's something extremely wrong with that family, and that they need help. This is downright one of the most disturbing stories. It was a fan-submitted story regarding a viewer who claims he and his family experienced when invited to his mother's friend's Christmas dinner during the year 2016. Allegedly, the viewer's family opted out of not to file any charges against the dad or family. The viewer remains traumatized about the ordeal and shares his horrific incident every Christmas.
Last Christmas Eve, my parents dragged me out to the mall along with my little sister. Early on in the night, I got bored and knew I wouldn't be able to stand shopping for clothes any longer. I convinced my parents to let me go explore the rest of the mall while they got presents for me and my sister. But of course, in typical fashion, they only agreed to it if I took my little sister along with me. I agreed and promised that I would call as soon as we were ready to leave and meet up at the Foot Locker. We walked around for a little while, but there was still nothing that piqued my interest. My sister, however, really wanted to see Santa. Not that she believed in him really, but she thought the concept of Santa was funny for some reason. Anyways, we got lined up in the center of the mall where they had a bunch of fake North Pole scenery put up around a Christmassy house that was supposed to be Santa's cabin or whatever. Nobody could actually see Santa because you had to go inside the cabin to meet him and get your pictures. Because we couldn't see, we had no idea why it was taking so long for the line to move. With 20 or 30 people ahead of us, the estimated wait time was almost an hour, but it's where my sister wanted to go, and I didn't have any better idea, so we stuck it out. Unfortunately, after about a half an hour, the soda that I'd had at the food court was hitting my bladder. I really had to take a leak. So I told my sister to go on without me or to hold my place in line if she was still waiting when I got back. Then I raced off to the nearest restroom. Just a few minutes later, I was done, and I went back to the Santa setup to see that my sister was no longer in line. I figured she was inside the cabin, but after I saw a few people go out and no sign of her, I got confused and decided I should check inside. I tried to tell them what happened, but those heartless helper elves didn't care at all. I pleaded with them to just let me check, saying that I didn't want to take any pictures and just wanted to make sure my sister was okay. But they didn't believe me. They just wrinkled their noses and told me to get in the back of the line. Not knowing what else to do, I did. And everybody in the line gave me weird looks while I walked back. I was even more annoyed when I saw that the line had doubled in size since I left it. I was fuming the whole time I waited, mad at myself for leaving the line and cursing out everything in my head. My sister didn't have a cell phone, so she was basically helpless without me. I was responsible for her, and if I didn't get her back, I was going to be in some deep trouble with my parents. So I waited, and waited, and waited, until finally, after a ridiculous amount of time, I got in. As soon as I stepped in, a chill ran down my spine. It was super dark in there, and it smelled kind of funny. To my left was the Santa, but I've never seen such a wrong guy to play the part. He was all scrawny and ghoulish with sunken-in eyes and a patchy beard. The only part of him that was fat was his ginormous beer gut, which was way out of proportion with the rest of him. He was hideous. I couldn't tell if he was trying to do a Christmas or Halloween thing, but I'd come all the way, so I had to try talking to him. Hello? Have you seen a little girl with dark hair about this high? Probably laughed at you instead of asking for presents?
Whoa there, kiddo. Aren't you gonna ask for presents?
No, I don't care about presents. I'm just looking for my sister. This is the last place she was at. Have you seen her?
Oh, come on. I won't be cheesy like all the other Santas. You don't have to sit in my lap or anything. You just have to pick one of these 3 presents here.
The presents were laying in his lap. A blue one on the left, a green one on the right, and a red one in the middle. I hadn't noticed them before because, well, who wants to look at the crotch of somebody who looks like that?
Not sure? I'll tell you what. If you let Santa do his job, Santa will help you do yours.
You mean you'll help me find my sister?
Of course!
All right then. Merry Christmas, I guess.
That's the spirit. Come here and take your pick. I'll give you a hint. I really recommend picking the red one.
I looked him up and down suspiciously. I wasn't a complete moron. I knew what he might be trying to do, but I wasn't sure. In spite of him, I pointed to the blue one.
Wrong! 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 Wrong!
He screamed, picked up the present, and hurled it against the wall. A bunch of Christmas chocolates exploded from it and it went everywhere.
Hey, what are you doing? I'm telling you to pick the red one.
No, I picked the green one.
You just think you're hot stuff, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, you little snaggletooth twink. I eat punks like you for a living. Is that what you want? Huh? For me to turn you into next year's chocolate?
Dude, what are you even saying?
Don't play dumb with me. Just pick the red one already. Come on, you want to find your little sister, don't you?
Fine, I picked the red one. He took the lid off the box, but I couldn't see what was inside it. The demented Santa waved his hand for me to come closer, and I did so with extreme caution. I peeked my head over and saw that it was full of candy canes, all different shapes, colors, and sizes.
Like what you see? Go ahead. Grab the biggest candy cane you can find and eat it.
Oh God, why am I doing this? I put my hand inside the box and fished around for a few seconds. I couldn't feel anything that seemed obviously bigger than everything else, until something at the bottom of the box was wrong. Really wrong. I jerked my hand out of the box and jumped back. I was about to curse out the Santa, but when I saw him again, I was speechless. He had completely unhinged his jaw and was laughing at me like a psychotic inhuman demon. I began to exit the cabin when the psychotic Santa lunged up from his seat, sprinted across the room, and cornered me against the wall. That's when the Santa pressed his demented face against mine and handed over the red box, saying,
Merry Christmas. And make sure you eat the biggest candy cane last.
Instinct took over and I broke away at the last second, sprinting through the exit. That's when I found my sister, huddled up against the wall by herself eating a candy cane. I slapped it out of her hand, grabbed her by the arm, and took us back to our parents. When we finally reached the Foot Locker, I asked her, "What were you doing in there while I was in the bathroom?"
Nothing. I was just eating a candy cane that Santa gave me while I was waiting for you.
I was really freaking out and had to call my parents right away. They raced over to us and I told them everything. They immediately called the cops, and a few minutes later, that sicko was in handcuffs, despite him being locked away. It won't ever change what happened. This is the image of the quote-unquote candy cane Santa. He was a 63-year-old Arkansas native who worked as a mall Santa at a local plaza and was arrested for his heinous crimes. The minimum sentence of his charge was 18 days, or a maximum sentence of 1,587 years. I think it's safe to say he'll be sharing candy canes in prison going forward.
Everybody knows that mall Santas aren't the sort of people you should readily trust around children, which must be why there's always a crowd of elf characters in that area to keep the costumed man in check. I, for one, am certainly glad that this is the case, but likely not for the reason you'd expect. I have a terribly clear memory of one occasion with one of these mall Santas. I was much younger at the time, young enough to still be interested in the idea of Santa Claus, but more than old enough to have my doubts about the truth of it. My whole family went out to the community mall for some last-minute Christmas shopping. The first thing that caught my attention was the staging area, right inside the entrance, where Santa Claus was granting wishes and taking pictures along with his team of elves. To my recollection, that was probably the most wholesome and charming Santa Claus charade the mall ever had. All the kids in line looked so excited to talk to the one and only St. Nicholas. I immediately started begging my parents to let me go see him. Mom, can we go see Santa Claus?
Maybe later, honey. The line is too long. We'd be there all day. We should go shopping while we have all our energy.
Okay, but if it's shorter later, can we go?
Sure, sweetie pie. You've been nice this year.
I guess my parents wanted to buy what they could before everything was gone. It didn't make sense to me at first, but the longer they made me wait, and the more times they asked me what I wanted for Christmas, the more it began to dawn on me that Santa Claus wasn't really the person who gave out the presents every year. Obviously, it was just the parents who bought things for their children. Otherwise, what would be the point of asking Santa Claus to get me something if Mom had just gotten me everything I wanted right in front of me? So, by the end of the shopping spree, I was in a pretty sour mood. I know that every kid has to realize this at some point, but having the magic stripped away so close to Christmas brought on a lot of conflicting emotions for the younger me. But it would only get worse from there. As we were about to leave the mall with our purchases in tow, we all noticed how much shorter the line for Santa had gotten.
Look at that, honey! You could almost walk right up to him.
At that point, I didn't even want to talk to him anymore. The glow was all gone. And now it seemed like every one of the few kids that were waiting in line were almost scared. Despite that, I just didn't have the energy to say no at the time. So we all shuffled into the queue so I could get to sit on Santa's lap. But as we got closer and closer, I started to see that the line wasn't the only thing that had changed in the few hours since I'd last seen the staging area. Santa Claus looked different. Before, he'd been this jolly old, warm and fuzzy-looking grandpa. But now, he didn't even look like the same person anymore. And it wasn't just that his fake beard wasn't on right. It looked like he was wearing some kind of mask. The smiling rosy cheeks from before had turned pale and droopy. I was extremely nervous by the time I got to the front of the line, but I don't think the rest of my family was paying attention. Everybody's just tired, that's all.
Go on, honey. Go get your picture.
Timidly, I stepped up to Santa's lap. Without a word, he picked me up with a vice grip and shoved me down between his legs. And what do you want for Christmas, kid? I couldn't respond. I was frozen with fear I couldn't explain. Well, kid? Come on, spit it out. You're not the real Santa. Huh? What'd you say? Speak up, I'm old. I said, you're not the real Santa Claus. You're a fake. I'd seen this movie where a guy tears the fake beard off the mall Santa. I thought it would be a great way to expose this guy who was giving me the creeps. But when I reached up with a quickness and yanked the white ball of fluff with all my might, more came off than I expected. The entire face peeled off and crumpled up in my stunned grasp. The real face of the man beneath was caked in blood and bits of tissue, grinning at me maniacally with all wretched manner of craggly teeth and sharp features. After that initial moment of shock, he threw me off to the ground and started running for the door. I remember being unable to move, hearing a cacophony of shrieks and shouts and wailing. The man didn't get far. The security guards ran him down with an initiative I'd never seen from a mall cop before, or since. In the coming days, we found out that the original Santa Claus actor was discovered in his van out in the mall parking lot, naked, with his face cut off. He went on break and never came back. We never learned that psycho's motive, but one thing's for sure. I will never forget that moment every time I hear the name Santa Claus come up.
You boy, go get me some fresh meat from the food court. Okay, sir, Several years ago, I had a terrifying experience with Santa Claus. I still believe that Santa was real, and I thought he could do anything. I was just like every other kid my age, until one day. My mom always had this large mark on her face for as long as I can remember. I was always used to seeing her like that, and it never really bothered me. But sometimes the other kids at school would tease me and make comments about her, calling her names like Two-Face from the Batman movies. I didn't like them talking bad about my mother. It upset me. My mom was basically my hero. She had raised me by herself for my whole life. One year, it was getting close to Christmas. I told my mom that I wished that Santa would fix the mark on her face. I told her to ask Santa to do it for Christmas, but my mom told me that it was okay and that she didn't need the mark to go away. She said it was a skin condition that she had since she was little. I tried to change her mind, but she insisted that it didn't matter. I figured that my mom just didn't want to ask for herself, so I decided that I would ask the mall Santa next time I saw him. I believed he was the real Santa like most gullible kids did. So one day, I convinced my mom to take me to the mall. I told her that I wanted to see the Christmas decorations. She didn't really want to at first, but I kept begging her until she finally agreed to take me. When we got to the mall, my mom let me go off by myself, and we agreed to meet back at the front at a certain time. I immediately got in line to see Santa. There was a pretty big line of kids already there, so I had to wait a while. I watched Santa talk to the other kids while I stood there, but there was something off about him. He looked creepy as shit. I couldn't fully explain why, but he didn't look like a regular Santa. I was a little freaked out, but I was still just a gullible kid. I didn't think there could be anything wrong with Santa. I told myself that Santa was just having a bad day or something. When I finally reached the front of the line, I immediately went to sit on his lap. That's when I noticed he was looking at me in this creepy way. "What do you want for Christmas, little boy?" Even his voice was scary. He wasn't even trying to sound like Santa. I asked him if he could take away the mark on my mom's face. He immediately said that he couldn't. I asked him again and again, but he kept refusing. I didn't understand how Santa could refuse my request. I kept pushing him, thinking he was just testing me or something. Finally, the Santa just completely snapped. He started yelling at me to stop asking him.
Stop asking me that! Just shut up! Shut the hell up before I get security to kick you out of this mall, you spoiled little brat!
I was really scared now. I got off his lap and tried walking away. But the scariest, most blood-curdling thing happened to me. The Santa went psycho and lunged at me. He grabbed me by the shoulders and started shaking me around like a rag doll. "Stop it, Santa, you're hurting me!" I was absolutely terrified. He wouldn't let me go. He just kept holding me there with his hands digging into my shoulders. All I could recall was that I started to cry loudly. I remember the Santa saying over and over again, "Shut up! Shut the hell up!" That's when the elves were finally able to pull Santa off of me. He just kept glaring at me with the creepiest face ever. The elves tried to ask me if I was okay, but I just wanted to find my mom. My mom was waiting for me, and I told her everything that happened. I was completely traumatized. My mom totally freaked out and told me that she was going to have the Santa arrested. She made me go back and point him out to her. I just wanted to go home, but my mom insisted that he wouldn't get away with it. We walked back over, and I pointed out the Santa to her. I waited for my mom to start yelling at him, but she took one look at him and then immediately grabbed me and took me home. She had this terrified look on her face as we left. I asked her why she didn't call the police, but she told me to forget everything that happened. She made me promise that I wouldn't bring it up again. I always wondered why my mom was so scared of Santa. She never talked about it again. Years later, when I was old enough to know that Santa wasn't real, I asked her about the ordeal again. She hesitated for a moment, but then decided that I was old enough to know the truth. She told me that Santa was her ex-husband, and my dad. The reason that she had never told me what happened to him is because he was incredibly abusive. She told me that the mark on her face wasn't a skin condition. It was actually a scar from a laceration caused by my dad before I was born. After she had me, she left him out of fear that he would hurt me too. It was all hard for me to take in. It really freaked me out that I had been so close to my actual dad. I couldn't believe that he had given my mom that scar. Everything made more sense to me now after knowing the truth. I'm still traumatized by mall Santas. Every time I see one, I think about that day. I don't know what my dad would have done to me if I hadn't run away in time. This story was inspired by a real subscriber-submitted story that allegedly happened to the victim when they were younger. The subscriber has mentioned that his mother has since had a restraining order on the ex-husband, and that he hadn't heard or seen his dad since the mall Santa ordeal. This story is from the point of view of a 15-year-old boy. I had lived in this dingy 2-story house since the day I was born. It was quite the dread living in, as the heaters would malfunction during the winter, so we always made sure to have the fireplace on. But what made the house extra terrifying was how close it was to a prison. I've always wondered for a very long time why my parents chose to live in such a dangerous place. So last year I pestered my dad about moving out and looking for a better place to stay. But every time I try to persuade him, he would brush me off and tell me how this house had been passed down for generations and had always brought good fortune and prosperity to the family. As an only child, my parents felt it would be appropriate to hire a nanny, someone they could trust to take care of me, especially when they were out. So ever since I was 2, this old nanny was basically my roommate. Her presence made me feel safer and less frightened about the nearby prison. However, I still had the habit of looking out my window, checking out the massive wall topped with barbed wire flowing with electricity. I couldn't tell whether I was amazed or if some part of me was still afraid. I mean, who wouldn't be? If you knew your neighbors were some of the most diabolical people ever known to mankind clustered under one roof, wouldn't that make your heart beat a little faster? Knowing this prison had maximum security, I felt a sense of relief that prompted me to close the curtain and go to bed. Then, the following night, I came home late after playing games at my friend's house a few blocks away. And upon seeing our garage empty, I knew my parents weren't home yet. But it didn't matter. I knew Sabrina would be home to keep me company like she always did, even if we didn't have long conversations. However, when I entered the kitchen to grab something from the fridge, I read a note from Sabrina saying she had to go home to rectify an issue involving her close relatives. In her note, she promised that she'd try to come back as soon as possible, and so she reminded me to keep all the doors and windows locked and to hit the sack early. However, without supervision, I instead took the opportunity to play my phone. And when I checked the time, noticing it was 12, I decided to call it a night. Then, lying comfortably on the bed with my eyes heavy as sandbags, I heard loud footsteps emanating from downstairs. Half asleep, I jolted. I initially thought the nanny had returned with some heavy bag or something. I hastily ran down the stairs to greet her, even though she often told me not to. But as I descended to the first floor, a cold sensation wrapped around my skin. Then, gazing into the darkness before me, my throat went dry as I called out and said,
Sabrina? Is that you?
I waited, but there was no answer, and so I called out to her once more.
Hey, Sabrina!
However, nothing but silence filled the air.
Sabrina, this isn't funny!
I yelled in exasperation. Then, seconds later, I heard one of her trash bins topple over, followed by a low, menacing chuckle. I stood still, and as soon as my body quivered, I had second thoughts about staying there, convinced that the best thing to do was just run upstairs and hide. However, I was too scared to move. Moments later, someone began to emerge from the darkness, and as the mysterious person came toward me, revealing their identity under the foyer's dim lights, I instantly recognized it wasn't Sabrina. Instead, it was a large man. He was lean and about 7 feet tall, wearing an orange t-shirt and pants. He had long, thinning hair, and was disheveled like he hadn't showered in days. He didn't say a word, and that was the most terrifying thing. Not knowing what he planned to do made me panic. Then, all hell broke loose when the large man made direct eye contact with me. Triggered by the adrenaline, I began sprinting up the stairs, locked myself in a room, and hid under the bed. It never crossed my mind that I would come face to face with a stranger in my house, but I didn't know where else to go. As I bit my nails in sheer terror, I could hear the man running around my house, smashing into walls and tearing the place down. Soon, I heard the sounds of furniture breaking and glass shattering, and then, that's when all the lights around the house went out.
You can't hide from me!
I tried to crawl out from under the bed, desperately searching for a phone to call 911, but I couldn't see amidst the darkness. Still, I didn't give up. However, as time passed, I heard the commotion downstairs finally cease, followed by something more terrifying. That's when I hear footsteps coming up the stairs. They were slow but heavy. I knew if I didn't find my phone quickly, I may never see daylight again. So in my frantic attempt to find my phone, I suddenly hit what appeared to be a drawer. That's when everything went quiet. I didn't even want to breathe. I knew I had stupidly blown my cover. I then heard the creep opening the doors to the other rooms one by one. Mine was at the end of the hallway, so I knew he would eventually inspect this room as well. As soon as I grabbed my phone, I crawled underneath the bed once more, where I instantly contacted 911 and said,
Hello, this is an emergency. There's a giant stranger. There's a giant man in my house. Please help.
I tried to keep my voice down as I described the man. At this point, I swear I could hear the man breaking more stuff from the 3 other rooms.
Hey, buddy, where are you? Come out, wherever you are.
And that's when I heard my door creak open. I didn't move a muscle. I didn't even breathe. I held my hands across my mouth the entire time. And that's when the most terrifying thing happened. The man yanked me from underneath the bed and started slamming me onto it. I broke free from his grasp and was cornered by his enormous stature. That's when I slapped both of my hands on my cheeks and wailed in misery. I legitimately thought my life was going to be over, until I heard several police officers shouting at the man to get on the floor. Since I live next to a penitentiary, officers were always roaming close to my house, and it didn't take long until they barged through the front door and apprehended the man. Later on, I discovered that the creep was a convicted murderer who disguised himself as one of the security staff, allowing him to escape the prison. Consequently, when my parents found out about the incident, they finally decided it was time to move out and find a safer neighborhood to live in.
There's been something I've been needing to talk about for a few years now. It was back in my second year of college. During my last semester at the university I started at before I transferred, for reasons that will become obvious. It was wintertime then, snowing constantly. I always say the reason I transferred is because transportation was a huge drag, and it was, but that's not the full reason. The buses were late all the time, and on the cold days when nobody wanted to walk, they were so jam-packed that there wasn't even a space for me to stand by the time it got to my stop. So I went about finding a different way to get there, but since I couldn't afford a car or even a bike, I had to walk, which meant I had to find a shortcut. I did find one, but it wasn't perfect. It was a trail that cut through the woods between the campus and my apartment, and it cut a good chunk of time off of my route. The only problem was that it passed by this old abandoned cabin. Well, It was abandoned, but it did have an occupant. It was some deranged old hobo guy who took shelter in it when it was cold. There were legends about him at the school. We called him Santa because he apparently only wore an old Santa suit that he must have stolen from the mall years ago. It was alleged that he always had these reindeer in the cabin with him. I figured he was some kind of animal whisperer, like they were his friends or something, because he was too much of an outcast to have human friends. If he was just there, it wouldn't have been a problem, but he lived off the people that passed by on the trail. Whenever he saw someone, he'd charge them $1. It was like the toll for taking the shortcut, and for those who didn't pay the toll would end up on the naughty list. The guy was a real menace too. The only word he could speak was dollar. But other than that, he just screamed and grunted. Obviously, this was a terrible thing to have to go through just to get to class, but I gave the bus several chances, and it was honestly worse, even for as terrifying as the shortcut was. I put up with it, and always had $2 in my pocket, one for each way. But one day, as I was passing by his house and walking up to it, because I never tried to sneak by out of the fear that he would chase me, I noticed that there were a ton of flies coming out of it. The whole thing reeked of crap. I held my breath and knocked on the door with my $1 in my hand. And right away, the freak poked his head out through the gaps in the broken door, glaring at me with the most disturbing expression ever. $1. He then reached out his crusty old hand and grabbed my wrist, pulling me in closer to him. $1. I closed my eyes reflexively and he shook my wrist until I let go of the $1 and yanked my hand back as he reached down to grab it. I ran away shouting and cursing him, totally about to piss myself. That same day when I sat down for lunch with one of my friends, I told him about what happened. He never believed in the dirty Santa legend though, and he seriously thought I was messing with him. I'm being for real, man. There's a dirty hobo dressed like Santa on the shortcut. He's crazy. Dude, you're crazy. I've walked that trail and I didn't see anybody in that cabin because you walked it in the spring. Santa only comes during the winter. Do you hear yourself right now? Talking about Santa Claus like you still believe in him in your 20s. He's scary, man. You better not go down that trail without a couple bucks in your pocket. Or what? He'll put me on the naughty list? Yes, he will. You don't want that. Well, thanks for the warning, chicken shit, but I'm too broke to be scared out of my cash by some dirty hobo in the woods. I really did everything I could try to make him take it seriously, but he wouldn't listen to me. I was just hoping that I was being more scared than I needed to be, and that some of the legends I heard weren't completely true. I had to stick around for another class, but my friend was done for the day and went home right after lunch. I waved goodbye to him after I reminded him where the trail was, and I made sure he had $1, but I already knew he would want to keep it for himself. When I was finally free, I walked through the shortcut a little faster than normal. My heart sank when I saw a thick trail of blood on the trail, leading right up to the cabin. My hand was shaking, but I walked up to pay my toll anyway, hoping that he had just hunted down some wild game in the forest or something. I knocked on the door and stuck my hand out with $1 clutched in it, averting my eyes until nothing happened. Hello? Anyone home? When there was no answer, I slowly pushed the door open, getting my first good look at the interior of the cabin. I realized then that all those reindeer I'd been seeing weren't actually real alive reindeer, but taxidermy fakes. There were dismembered deer parts everywhere, and heads up on the wall like trophies. And then, right next to them, the head of my friend looking right at the door. And that dirty Santa wannabe maniac was just sitting by the fire pit, laughing. His mouth was caked in blood, but he couldn't have looked more pleased with himself. I dropped my $1, ran away, and didn't look back. It was in the middle of the day when I got home, but I crawled into bed and pulled the sheets over my face and tried to block out the world, suppress the memory of everything that I'd just seen, and forget about the whole thing like it was all just some terrible, awful nightmare. I couldn't even do that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my friend's head decapitated and hung up on the wall like it was a hunting trophy. So I didn't close my eyes. I kept them open all day and all night, trying to not even blink. My neighbors found out I was going insane by the second day of that, and I used it as an excuse to blame my bad mental health on the university and get transferred. I ended up changing my major completely and taking some courses abroad, just to get as far away from that school as possible. I never wanted to take that trail again. I didn't even want to think about it, but as much as I don't want to do it, I do still remember it every day. My friend was eventually reported as a missing person, but I don't even know if they ever found him. I'm not sure what even became of the dirty cabin Santa, or if people still have to pay the toll to walk that trail. Of course, I regret never saying a word about all of this until now, but at least I finally got it off my chest.
I recently stayed at a hotel with my parents for an extended weekend over the holidays. We were at one of those really old hotels that used to be super fancy when it was built 100 years ago. It was one of the biggest I'd ever seen, and it was the only place with any vacancy over the holidays when my parents booked the trip. I don't even know why they forced themselves into it. My mom and dad never got along, so they were only doing it so we could pretend like we were some happy, normal family for the holidays. They really didn't plan anything out either, because there was literally nothing for us to do while we were there. The hotel had a really eerie vibe to it. It reminded me of the lodge from The Shining, and once that popped into my head, I couldn't stop seeing the similarities. There were no security cameras in the entire building as far as I could see, and not to mention, there were so few guests in all those big empty hallways and lobbies that it felt like we were completely alone there. And of course, we got snowed in on the first night by a huge storm, so there was no chance of us going out to do anything. The whole time we were there, we did everything to avoid each other. My mom essentially never left the hotel room. She cleaned things even though we had housekeeping and lied in bed all day watching TV on the crappy satellite channels until she passed out at 3 a.m. My dad, on the other hand, was always busy working no matter where he was. He was some kind of old-timey mystery novelist, and would get mad and yell at us if we got in the way of him working.
Get out of here! Can't you see I'm busy working? Go back to the room now!
He set himself up in the center of the biggest lobby and just typed his life away on that stupid typewriter all day long. Then he'd pass out on one of the couches in the lobby. I stayed in the room with my mom for the majority of my stay, bored out of my mind. By the time my mom let the 10th rerun of Titanic play on the TV, I got up and left to do something, even if it was just wandering around. I did a lot of wandering around, actually, but only for the first couple days. After a while, I learned it's not a good idea to be alone in the hallways of that hotel at night. On the third night, I couldn't sleep after my mom went down, so I left the room and tried to find something to look at. It was the middle of the night, and everything was dead quiet. I must have walked a mile through the hallways and not seen or heard a single soul. I started to get lost in my thoughts. Then I rounded a corner and saw him. There was a man at the far end of the hallway, staring at me. He was wearing a Santa Claus costume, except he lacked the big red coat and boots and was just wearing underwear. He stood on all fours like some sort of animal with his back hunched over. I froze and stared back at him. Then he waved at me, calling me over to him.
Hey, come here.
What do you want?
It's not about what I want. It's about what you want. It's Christmas, isn't it? You want presents, don't you?
No, I think I'm good.
Nonsense, you deserve it. Come on, come here. Don't be shy. I'm Santa Claus. You can trust me.
I knew it was a bad idea, but I inched closer. This was the most interesting thing that had happened so far. It was sheer boredom and curiosity that pushed me forward. I walked slowly and cautiously down the hallway, keeping my eyes on him the whole time. But when I got halfway there, all of a sudden, he darted around the corner and disappeared. When I got to the corner, I saw him partway down the hall, peeking out the doorway of one of the hotel rooms, waving at me to come closer again. I was legitimately horrified by the way he looked, but the fact that he actually appeared to be staying in one of the rooms eased my mind a bit. I thought maybe he did have a bunch of presents in his hotel room, so I walked over to his door. By the time I got there, he was standing behind the door, prodding me to come inside. All I remember seeing was the lights turned off in the room. It was pitch black and I could just barely see the man's face. That's when he said,
Come inside, little one. I have all my presents right in here.
Is it okay if you give them to me out here?
As soon as I said that, the smile on his face vanished. That's when the most terrifying thing happened. He lunged forward and grabbed me by the wrist, trying to pull me in. I pulled back against him and called out for help.
Help! Someone! Get this guy off of me! Help! Get inside! inside, you spoiled little brat! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops! Somebody please help me! Shut up and get your presents! There's no cops in this hotel, you idiot!
He almost managed to drag me into the room, but at the last second, I managed to break free. I wasted no time running away at full sprint and raced back to my room. I slammed the door shut behind me, throwing the deadbolt and latching the chain. I then dragged a rug out of the bathroom and shoved it underneath the crack of the door. That way there would be no way on earth anybody could get in. I was so shaken up and paranoid that I checked under all the beds and looked behind the shower curtain. But it was just me and my mom alone in the hotel room. I had nobody to talk to and was forced to internalize the whole ordeal, as my mom was also passed out so severely that she didn't even budge when I made all that noise coming in. For the rest of the weekend, I never once left the hotel room for anything, not even to eat. I convinced my mom to order room service for the remainder of the trip. For some reason, I was too scared to even talk about it while we were still there. I had planned on telling her everything when we got home, but I saw something while we were checking out that kept me from ever even thinking about that while my father was still alive. I was disassociating behind the two of them while they were arguing in front of the clerk at the checkout counter, when I happened to notice something in my father's briefcase which he'd set on the floor beside him. It was overstuffed and wasn't closed completely, and there was the telltale red and white fluff of a Santa Claus costume sticking out of it, along with a half sheet of paper from the manuscript he'd been working on all weekend. There was only one line on it, repeated across the entire pages, that read, "My son is on the naughty list and will pay for it this Christmas."
This story was told from the perspective of a female girl. It happened a few years ago around the Christmas holiday. There was this little girl living in a small house with her parents, and since Christmas Day was approaching quickly, her father began setting up the tree while her mom took care of the Christmas ornaments. The little girl was so ecstatic that it was difficult to contain herself. As the little girl's parents continued to decorate the tree, the girl would chew on her nails while twitching her head to the side like some deranged crackhead. The parents would immediately take notice and began escorting her to her bedroom. The next day, the parents were in the living room, drinking some coffee while watching television. The entire house, including the tree, was completely decorated. That's when the little girl could be seen sprinting down the stairs and towards the Christmas tree, only to be left standing in front of the tree. Her parents were left confused, as the little girl's demeanor, which was once filled with excitement and anticipation, instantly turned to nothing when she saw that under the Christmas tree was merely a carpet with no presents. Unable to contain her disappointment, she asked,
"Mom, Dad, where are the presents?"
They both looked at each other and smiled, as if her concerns didn't matter. Then, moments later, her mom crouched, patted her head, and said,
"You have to wait till Christmas, dear. Santa only arrives on Christmas Day."
The girl then started slamming her fist towards the mother, as both parents had to physically restrain the girl and bring her into the bedroom. It quickly became quite evident on how desperate the girl was to get her hands on those gifts that she fantasized about daily. On Christmas Eve, her parents suggested that she should prepare some cookies and milk. When she asked why, her dad told her that Santa only gives delightful gifts to children that offer him treats. Hence, that's precisely what the girl did. The girl grabbed a batch of cookies and carton of milk and left it on the table accompanied by her mother. The parents figured that they would sneak some presents underneath the tree before the girl would awake the next day. Then, in the middle of the night, everyone went to sleep except for that girl. Her zeal and impatience was so overwhelming that she couldn't hit the hay. Moments later, after hours of flip-flopping around in bed, she heard noises downstairs. The girl immediately got up as she assumed Santa had arrived downstairs. She then snuck out the door to avoid waking up her parents. Shortly after, as she cautiously made her way down the stairs, she slowly became more anxious, capturing sounds like munching and slurping in the living room. The girl then tiptoed her way down the bottom of the steps and saw the most gut-wrenching sight a kid could ever witness. There she was, greeted by a large, ghoulish-looking Santa. He was facing the Christmas tree while munching on the cookies and slurping on the milk carton like a rotten pig. At this point, she wanted to head back upstairs and hide under the bed. However, a combination of fear and curiosity kept her in place. Thus, the girl asked,
Santa? Is that you?
There was no response, and while he remained silent, he put down the carton, slowly turning his head 180 degrees, with a sinister grin revealing sharp teeth and a wet lower lip caused by constant drooling. At first, he just stood there, staring at the little girl as she trembled in fear. Suddenly, the creepy man said,
"What's the matter? Cat got your tongue, little girl?"
Quivering still, the poor girl stuttered.
You're not Santa?
How rude. That's not how you greet Santa. I believe you've been a bad girl.
He licked his mouth as he tilted his head to one side and said,
"Do you know what happens to bad little girls?"
The girl inched back, her eyes widening, waking from her semi-stupor.
"You're on my naughty list,"
he said, in a pitch much lower than before. So, convinced his intentions were much worse than the girl ever anticipated, she cowered away in fear. Then, without time to think, the creepy man went on all fours, briskly walking towards her in a spider-like fashion, with his head still at 180 degrees.
Stay away from me! Mom! Dad! Help me!
Like a rabbit pursued by a snake, the girl made a run for it, but was immediately cornered.
"Look at me."
The man's creepy voice lingered in the air, and when she failed to listen, he repeatedly said,
"Look at me! Look at me! Look at me!"
Unable to run away, she froze in fear once again. Then, moments later, as the creep's head gradually turned to the right, the girl's head also began to turn like she didn't have a will of her own, and was now under the control of this man who was employing some kind of spell. Santa's head kept turning more and more to the right, causing the unfortunate little soul to holler out loud. And oddly enough, her screams couldn't reach her parents. Instead, they were sound asleep, dreaming of their daughter opening her presents, unaware of the horrors that had pinned her down. Then suddenly, the screams vanished, and the girl's head was upside down permanently at this point, her mouth and eyes wide open. Santa's head was in the same position, as he then smiled like a deranged ghoul out of hell.
"Merry Christmas!"
However, the entity wanted more, and so he made another rotation, this time at 360 degrees, bringing the girl's head back to its original position. As morning came, both parents were so excited to see their daughter that they knocked on her door, only to receive no response. So, they assumed she was still asleep. However, when they opened the door, they saw that her bed was empty. Thinking she was downstairs by the Christmas tree, the parents called out her name as they descended the stairs. As they finally entered the living room, both were speechless and utterly terrified by what they witnessed. They saw the head of the girl on top of the Christmas tree. By the carpet was her limbs wrapped with wrapping paper. There lied a note next to it, saying,
"Santa will return next Christmas."
This story happened during the Christmas holidays. I'm a father, a husband, and a breadwinner, which entailed me to work overtime more often than not. Of course, it was infuriating, as I wanted to be home with my family rather than trapped in a cubicle for hours on end. I had been trying to persuade my boss to offer me a home-based job. I'd always get on his good side, hoping to enlighten him regarding the benefits of working remotely. However, no matter what I did, he kept rejecting my pitch, looking for ways to bombard me with overtime work. There was never enough time for me to get a decent rest until vacation finally arrived. However, with only 3 days off, namely Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and Boxing Day, it still felt like I needed more time to rejuvenate. So, in the end, it still wasn't much of a vacation for me. When I'd see my boss and all the others from the upper management leave the office early while the lower echelon were given additional tasks, I'd bite my lower lip in frustration. But every night when I'd arrive home, I'd always find my wife sleeping soundly, exhausted from all the work, house cleaning, and cooking, in addition to taking care of our son. On weekends, whenever I had the chance to check up on my son in his bedroom, I'd usually find him drawing and eating a variety of chocolates. When I asked my son where he had gotten them, he would reply with,
Willy Wonka gave them to me.
Willy Wonka? Are you talking about Mr. Francis? I replied, assuming it was one of his male teachers. He would then reply with,
Nope, I said Willy Wonka, not Mr. Francis, Dad.
Without a tinge of reluctance, I scolded him, telling him the chocolates were bad for him. As a result, he ran to his mother to complain about how I was being a horrible parent. Through the years, my son and I had grown estranged since I was barely home. I would arrive home to watch my son draw while munching on these alleged Willy Wonka chocolates, which irked me every so often. Whenever I tried to speak to my wife about it, she would always brush it off like it wasn't a big deal. I remember even calling the school just to complain about it, but every time I'd call, they'd respond the same way, denying the school's engagement and handing out chocolates irresponsibly. Moreover, they'd claim to have no association with Willy Wonka's products. So one day I waited for my boss to head out of the office so I could sneak out of work, and when the coast was clear, I drove to my son's school, concealing myself amongst the trees near the playground, wearing a trench coat with binoculars in hand. I just had to know where the hell my son was getting these chocolates from. When he eventually left the school, I noticed him walking towards a different direction instead of the way home. This immediately prompted me to follow him. Moments later, I saw him enter an abandoned building by the corner of the street. I let about a minute go by before I followed him in there and snuck inside. That's when I noticed standing before me was a chocolate factory towering over me like an edifice that came straight out of a novel. And the more I gazed into the mammoth structure, the more I realized it resembled the one I saw in Willy Wonka's movie, with ramps and lines everywhere. I must be going nuts, I told myself. But despite my doubts, I went deep into the rabbit hole. There were oddly shaped machines and contraptions left and right. Moments later, I saw my son speaking to a man dressed up as Willy Wonka from a distance. He literally looked like the character in the film, as he wore the same giant top hat and sleek velvet coat. I couldn't help but wonder what this man's true identity was, and what's his purpose for meeting my son. It would soon become evident as I listened intently to their conversation.
So, my dear boy, you finally made it here. School's such a drag, isn't it? Kinda. This can all be yours if you want, but you must leave school so you can live here full time and have all the chocolates you want. Well, that sounds like fun, but... No buts! The only but that matters here is what's in those boy.
What the hell is he doing? For reasons I couldn't understand, something was off. Like he was trying to take my son, luring him in with these chocolates.
Anyway, here are the chocolates you asked for. Take them home and come back the next day for more. But before I let you go, I have a I want you to try.
I tackled the creep to the ground and restrained him as I yelled at my son, saying,
Don't just stand there, you idiot! Call the cops, now!
Out of fear, he did what I instructed him to do, and soon the police arrived, arresting Willy Wonka. Moments later, as I spoke to the investigators, I discovered that the man behind the disguise wasn't a stranger. He was my boss. It became clear why my boss left early for work all this time. He left me in the office to do all the work, just so he could lavish in his obsession for sweets and give them to my son. But what makes this story all the more disturbing was how my son's drawings that he had been invested in all this time was just drawings of Willy Wonka. All this time knowing that this was happening behind my back makes me sick every time I see chocolate anywhere I go.
In my last year of high school, my parents pressured me into getting a job to save money before I moved to college. I knew they couldn't offer me much once I left, so I didn't really have much choice. But with school still hanging around my neck, I wouldn't get a job that required real work. Instead, I applied for a part-time position as an elf in the local mall, backing up the visiting Santa Claus. I figured it couldn't be any harder than smiling and helping kids up and down from Santa's lap, and ushering away the occasional temper tantrum, of course. I got the job without any trouble, and initially, my hopes were high. The man who'd been hired to play Santa Claus really did look like the St. Nicholas himself. He didn't need one of those cheesy fake beards. His genuine facial hair was spot on. Plus, the fluffy suit of red and white looked like it had been tailor-made specifically for him. It was still early in the morning when I walked in on my first day. The mall wasn't even open yet, so I thought I should introduce myself before the day began. Good morning, sir. I'm the new helper elf.
Oh, good. Fresh meat. Make a good impression and get me some coffee, dear boy.
The way he spoke threw me off. He sounded like Santa, but he didn't say the things you'd expect Santa to say, or in the way Santa would. I glanced around idly to the other elves, meeting their intense stares. One of them looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Get the freaking coffee, dimwit." I heeded the urgency in his voice and rushed off to the food court. I didn't even know where the break room was, so I had to pay for a cup out of pocket from a restaurant, which was still opening up. When I got back, the elf that spoke to me before was knelt below Santa's chair, polishing his boots. It was a really strange sight, and it certainly wasn't in her job description. Still, I didn't want to intervene, so I did my best to ignore it as I handed Santa his coffee.
See this here, dear boy? This is what happens when you speak out of line. Elves need to respect Santa, and of course his beautiful reindeer. Got it?
Yes, sir.
You mean, yes, Santa.
Right, I'm sorry, Santa. At that point, I could understand why he was calling us dear boys and girls. He had a strange obsession with reindeer, so I assumed the pun was being said intentionally. I began having serious doubts about the job. However, as soon as the mall opened up and kids started lining up to meet us, things got easier. That's when Santa finally got into character, and for the duration of the business hours, he was the jolly man he was supposed to be. Thankfully, my shifts ended before Santa's, so I didn't have to deal with him during close. For the first couple weeks, every day was more or less the same. Every evening, I'd get home depressed, wondering how such a jerk could be Santa Claus. And every morning, I'd return to be slave to his beck and call. Over time, I found a certain urge of defiance building up inside of me every time I heard him order us around. Always, dear boy, do this, dear girl, do that, like we were his servants, as if we were dear to his heart in any way. One morning, I went in with a scowl on my face from all the pent-up frustration, and that Santa poser was right on top of me for it.
Hey, you! You're always leaving early and weaseling out of cleaning. Vacuum the stage, because somebody did a lousy job last night.
By the time I got back with the vacuum, he had another order for me.
You boy, go get me some fresh meat from the food court.
Okay, sir, just as soon as I finish cleaning.
Do it now! Do you want to learn what it's like to be one of my reindeer?
They're not even open yet, old man! Give me a minute! I clammed up, but I'd already let slip enough to piss him off. The other elves stared on in fear.
Dear boy, I'm gonna rip your stupid elf ears off and make them my earmuffs! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!
He lunged at me with sudden speed, but he was caught and held back by the other elves, thrashing and screaming.
Oh!
He eventually caved in and exited the mall. After that, the only thing left was explaining to the public why Santa had disappeared. We didn't mind. A whole mall full of kids bawling from disappointment was easy compared to dealing with that jerk. We improvised with the picture setup and carried out work for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, things took a sour turn when I got off. I was walking through the parking lot to get to my bus stop when I saw a Christmas stocking cap fluttering behind a dumpster. I could tell there was someone behind there. I crept up and looked over the edge, and saw the mall Santa eating the mangled corpse of a deer. He looked up at me with blood streaming from his mouth and said, "Dear boy, would you like some venison?" What the hell are you doing? What? Can't you see why I call you stupid elves my dear boys and girls now? I ran away as fast as I could, traveling the extra few blocks down the road to wait anxiously for the next bus. When I finally got home, I stumbled in, shaking, and fell into my bed. For the next few days, I didn't leave the house. I quit that job at the mall and started applying elsewhere. I didn't sleep well. The image of raw venison between Santa's teeth flashed before me in the dark. By the time Christmas rolled around, I'd slipped back into my old lazy habits like a coping mechanism. Hey son, we're going to the store to get some dinner. You want anything? Pizza? Fried chicken? Sure, Dad. How about venison?
No matter how many years have passed, I can't stop thinking about that night. It was in the early 2000s when I was still a teenager. I was usually home alone for the majority of my life. My mom was never really around. The only memories I have of her is that she was some alcoholic bimbo who always got into fights with my dad. Since then, it's just been me and my dad living in this dingy apartment complex in the downtown region of my city. I personally didn't really like it, as there were a lot of homeless people roaming the streets at night. But since we lived on the top floor, the view of the city was pretty delightful, minus the crackheads. My dad was a pretty chill dude. I basically had free reign to do whatever I wanted since he left me home alone often. He was always out on a date or working overtime trying to make ends meet, so I would often invite my friends over for sleepovers. Besides that, I was often alone. I had already gotten myself into a good bit of trouble here and there, but I had my eyes and heart set on another little plaything entirely. A cute boy across the street who I just couldn't stop thinking about. I had him wrapped around my finger before he knew it. Cell phones weren't a super common thing at the time, but I had a telephone by my bed that was wired up to the receiver, and I'd talk on that thing for hours every day. Obviously, my favorite person to call was my boyfriend next door. We lived right across the street from each other, and on the same floors in our respective buildings, so by fate, our bedroom windows faced each other. At night, when everyone else was asleep, we stayed up and talked on the phone and looked at each other through the window. We thought it was the most romantic thing in the world. It was kind of like the equivalent to FaceTime, before that was even a concept. Of course, all the FaceTime just made me want to be with him even more. It wasn't enough to just see and hear him. I wanted him in my room. With a single parent in the house and no siblings, it didn't take long for me to find an opportunity in which I was home alone. Hey, I'm going on a date tonight, so you'll be by yourself until tomorrow morning.
Okay, whatever.
You're not excited for me or anything? You don't care at all that I'm getting back out there?
Ew, Dad. Don't talk to your daughter about that. Go make friends at a bar or whatever old men do.
Okay, I see. You're busy. I'll leave you alone.
Thank you. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyway, what was that you were saying about me?
That you look hot tonight.
How can you even tell from all the way over there?
That's just how beautiful you are. Do me a favor. If it rains tonight, try not to get wet, because you know sugar melts.
Oh, stop it.
Okay.
No, don't actually.
Then I won't.
You know what you should do?
What?
You should come over. I'm gonna be home alone. My dad's gonna be gone all night. He's going out on some date. We should have ourselves a little date.
Really? Are you sure?
I'm very sure. It's cold, you know. I need somebody to keep me warm tonight. That could be you if you came. Just think about it. We could snuggle all night long. Just you and me. Nobody else around.
That sounds good. Really good.
Uh-huh. So are you coming over?
I will. But I have to wait for my parents to go to sleep so I can sneak out.
How long is that gonna take?
Just a few more hours.
A few more hours? Well, then you better stay on the phone with me. Keep me company.
Don't worry, I got you. We chatted for the next 2 to 3 hours while gazing at each other through the window. That boy made me wait until 3 o'clock in the morning before he got the courage to walk across the street under the nose of his parents. But before he left his place, I watched him filling his backpack with clothes and whatnot. I waited patiently in anticipation as he was getting ready and away from the telephone momentarily, since the phone cord couldn't stretch that long, nor could the phone go on speaker. When he finally finished with his shenanigans and got back on the phone, I started egging him on.
It's 3 a.m. Aren't you gonna come over? I'm getting sleepy.
Babe, I'm sorry, but
Are you freaking shitting me?
Don't worry, he'll be back in his bedroom in no time. Are you still home alone?
Yes, my dad left 3 hours ago. Get over here already.
Alright. I'll be over in a sec. Just give me a few more minutes. All of a sudden, Jonathan's face turned completely pale, and his eyes lit up as if he had just seen a ghost. He was suddenly silent. He dropped the phone on the ground and put his hands up to his cheeks. In an expression of sheer horror, his mouth just about fell on the floor, hanging wide open, seemingly unable to move.
Jonathan? Jonathan, you're scaring me. What the hell are you looking at? Hello? Why are you looking at me like that?
He just wouldn't move. It was like he was frozen. I waved at him frantically and kept yelling at him over the phone, but I was talking to a statue.
Is something wrong? Hey, pick up the phone. Tell me what's going on. Are you okay?
No matter how much I prodded at him to answer me, he would just stand there shaking with his hands on his cheeks, shivering like a deranged crackhead that was about to OD. The only thing I could do was watch him slowly open his mouth, more and more and more, like he was something straight out of a cartoon flick. I began to helplessly plead with him by shouting at the top of my lungs.
Answer me! You're scaring me! Pick up the phone, you idiots! Come on, talk! Say something! Anything!
Finally, his arm moved, shaking as he picked up the phone and put it to his face. With his other arm, he pointed directly at me and said, You're not home alone. As soon as he said that, the lights in my bedroom flicked off. In an instant, everything was pitch black.
Oh God, please call the...
It's time for a family reunion.
Groundhog Day has always been a strange tradition to me, ever since I learned what a groundhog really is. It was my older brother who taught me, and I'll never forget it. But I guess, just like everyone else, I'll never speak on it either, and I'll keep the sham about those timid little mammals alive. That being said, I need to know that I'm not alone in hiding the truth about groundhogs, those buried secrets. For this reason, I'm sharing a key childhood memory to the internet, anonymously of course. It was Christmas several years ago. I was much younger then and far more ignorant. My family, me, my older brother, and our parents had rented a winter cottage in the countryside for the holiday weekend. They wanted to get away from the noise of the city and retreat to the old-fashioned ways of living. Furnaces and firewood, no connection to the outside world and all that. The rustic essentials. All my brother and I cared about were the wide open spaces of trees and fresh powder without one chaperone in sight. On the first evening, while our parents were preparing dinner in the cottage, my brother and I were out playing in the snow, building forts and staging great battles with snowballs. Then, to our surprise, another kid around our age appeared from within the trees, and we stopped. "Hey, you guys must be the new visitors. Do you think I could join in?" We shrugged and let him over. For the rest of the evening, we teamed up as brothers against the alien invader, pelting him with snowballs from our impenetrable forts. He quickly got tired of our camping. "Hey, you guys should follow me to this clearing I know of. There's way more open space. Don't worry, I live around here, so it's safe." "Nah, man, it's dinner time for us. Maybe next time, dude." "Both of you are a bunch of chicken shits." We ignored him and went inside the cottage. Dinner was on the table waiting for us, and man, was it delicious. Don't knock firewood smoked ham until you've tried it. That stuff put us right to sleep. The next morning was Christmas Day, and also our last full day at the cottage. We were to leave the following morning on Sunday. For the first little while, we were stuck inside, opening presents with our parents and doing all sorts of obligatory bonding activities. We were itching to get outside the whole time. Snow just doesn't fall the same in the city as it does out in the wilderness. Finally, when they started on dinner once again, my brother and I were free to resume our snowball fight. We built up our defense forts even more, but right as we were about to launch the first attacks, the same kid from yesterday showed up again. "You boys gonna hide in your little trenches all day again? Or are you gonna come join me on the battlefield like real men?" His delivery struck a nerve in both of us as we were huddled with our faces in the snow. Fine, man. We'll go, but we're gonna destroy you. That's what I like to hear. Wait, let me tell Mom and Dad we're leaving first. Oh, come on. Do you need Mommy and Daddy's permission for everything? This kid and his harsh words were getting to me. I gave in and joined my brother in his vow to pummel that jerk with snowballs. So, we followed him through the forest for about half a mile until we reached the massive flat clearing surrounded by huge, towering trees. The kid threw first, without warning, so my brother and I teamed up again and did battle for several hours. Not that I liked the kid, but it sure was fun to have a real enemy for a snowball fight. After a long, heartfelt fury of battle, all three of us were ready for a break. The local kid retreated into the woods for a piss, while my brother congratulated me on a war well won. As soon as the kid returned, he was back at it with the snowballs, except they weren't normal snowballs. They were yellow. He nailed both of us in the face with yellow snow before we could react. Piss balls! Get got, chumps! I started to cry, but my brother had a different reaction. I saw the rage flare up in his eyes before he ran the kid down and threw him into the snow, grappling on top of him and laying into him with fists, swing after swing, without end. All I could think about was how late it was getting, and how we'd need to get back to the cottage before it got dark. Stop! Stop! I'll call the cops! You'll go to jail! You're assaulting me! My brother was unfazed. He continued to beat that poor kid into a bloody pulp. Eventually, there were no more screams. Yet still, my brother maintained his barrage of punches, splattering crimson into the snow surrounding them. I was so confused. I'd never seen my brother do anything like that. When he finally let up, he came to me and put a bloodied hand on my shoulder. Hey, little bro. Help me bury this kid in the snow. What? Hurry up or I'll beat the crap out of you too. The shock of the situation sent me into autopilot. I helped dig the hole on my hands and knees, still tearing up. And when I caught a look at that poor kid's face, or what was left of it, I nearly vomited. As we covered the body, the sun began to disappear beyond the horizon, along with my innocence. The rest of that weekend was unbearably tense. We returned to the cottage in darkness, late for dinner, and got interrogated by our parents. Neither of us said anything about what happened, just a load of flimsy excuses. We didn't eat much either. We couldn't. That night, when neither of us could hope to sleep, my brother did his best to explain everything. That was just a groundhog, little bro. Don't worry about anything. Lots of jerks like him become groundhogs. People call jerks pigs and hogs all the time, and the ones people hate the most end up in the ground, buried in the dirt or snow, like we just did. Haven't you heard of Groundhog's Day? It was a lot for me to handle, learning that what we did was actually a Western tradition. That those little rodents are just used to conceal the grim reality. I still find it hard to believe, but you tell me.
I remember this one tobogganing park in my old area that me and a couple neighborhood friends used to play at. It was Christmas break. And nothing mattered except who won the snowball fight, who made the best snow angel, and who could reach the top speed on their toboggan. It was a blast, and I was having fun, but I wasn't able to appreciate it as much as I could have. One of the neighborhood kids that we didn't really vibe with as much had come out with us that day. I wanted it to just be me and my best friend. We functioned best as a duo, and this weak third link was getting in the way of things. Not that we hated him, he just kinda sucked at everything. When I raced him down the hill, my friend stayed at the top to track who was the fastest. I was, of course. The neighborhood kid was slow in more ways than one. I got to the bottom a full 10 seconds before he did. It was during that brief moment that I spent alone at the bottom of the hill that I saw something really strange. Something that in the moment I didn't know would spell the end of all the good times. Way in the distance, through a light thicket of trees, I saw a face that didn't belong on the body it was attached to. It was unmistakably the face of Winnie the Pooh. It had the classic golden color of Honey and the black beady eyes. But the man I saw with that face was almost inhuman looking. Not to say that he looked like a Pooh Bear exactly. He was haggard and filthy and all around just a bone-chilling sight. And of course, the moment I saw him, he saw me too, and he didn't look away. We stared at each other from across the distance for what felt like eternity.
Hey, what are you looking at?
What? Oh, that guy right there. Do you see him? I think he painted his face to look like Winnie the Pooh. Funny, isn't it?
No, man, that's not funny. You gotta stay away from those people.
What are you talking about, dude?
I've heard stories about creeps who dress up like that. They're bad news. Come on, stop looking at him and let's go up the hill before you attract him over here.
Okay. I guess that kid had more brains than I gave him credit for. But at the time, I had a burning curiosity about what I'd just seen, and it was overriding all common sense. Of course, I didn't mention it again around the neighborhood kid. I noticed he always looked at me funny after that. Instead, I waited for him to leave me and my friend alone for a second. Then I set up a meeting. Hey man, you bored? Yeah, been feeling weird today. Don't know why. I bet it's because of that stupid third wheel kid. What do you say we come back here around 10 tonight? Have some more fun without him dragging us down. Sure, man. I got you. Low-key? Definitely low-key. I didn't tell him why I really wanted to come back. I was worried he'd say no, so I just played it off that I wanted to toboggan more. Neither of us had cell phones at the time, but I did, however, carry a flashlight in my pocket. I went early and waited for him on my toboggan at the top of the hill. When he showed up, we rode down one more time, but before he started going back up, I stopped him. Hold on a second. I want to show you something. Show me what? You'll see. Just leave those here. We'll come back for them later. We won't be long. I led us through the sparse bit of woods and over a small hill. I remembered exactly where I'd seen that creepy Winnie the Pooh wannabe standing. When we got there, it started to snow again, and my friend wanted to turn back. What are you trying to show me, man? I don't see anything. Just a little bit farther. Come on, man, don't wuss out. I saw a well nearby, nestled a little deeper into the woods. It was dark and creepy. It probably hadn't seen any use since colonial times, and at this point it was barely more than a cobblestone ring. The moonlight was shining directly down into it, and I thought I could see the bottom, so I threw down a snowball. That's gotta be about 10 feet. Let's climb into it.
Let's what? Are you crazy?
I didn't bother arguing with him. I knew that if I went, he would follow me just because he didn't want to be alone out there. You're gonna get me into so much trouble, man. Wait for me. See? 10 feet.
Holy crap, look at that tunnel though.
For whatever reason, there was a long horizontal section under the well before it went down any further. After about 100 feet, we came across a sharp turn. It was tall enough for us to walk through. We slowed up, peeked our heads around the corner, and there they were in the opening. Dozens of them, men, women, and children. Each and every one of them with a sloppy tattoo of Winnie the Pooh plastered across their faces. They were tangled up with each other and muttering some sort of chant. We were both in shock, but my friend couldn't keep it together. Blood and honey, blood and honey, blood and honey. He retched, alerting the entire tribe to our presence. All at once, they stared us down with these soulless animal eyes. The second I saw one of them step towards us, I split. Run! I ran as fast as I could looking for an exit, just hoping that my friend was running behind me. I sprinted all the way back and scrambled out of the well. I fell into the snow topside and waited for my friend to come out, but he never did. I waited for several minutes and called his name 100 times, but there was no response. I knew before long that one of those freaks had gotten him. That's the moment when everything became blurry. I realized I was completely alone out there with nobody to help me, but also nobody to know what went down. Shaking and sick to my stomach, I stumbled back to our toboggans, which were already halfway covered in the snowfall. I finished the job of burying his toboggan and took mine home, where I pretended like nothing had ever happened. I felt like I'd gone crazy. I never told anyone what happened since. I was too scared of going to jail. My best friend has been a missing person for so many years now. I've tried to go back to that park to make myself feel normal, but it's ruined now. Every time I go in the winter, I swear I see my friend's face staring at me from the trees, always painted like Winnie the Pooh, just like them.
Even if you've known somebody for years, that doesn't mean you can trust them. It's almost impossible to truly know who someone is deep down. You can never tell when someone will betray you. Take this past New Year's, for instance. I surprised my girlfriend at the time with a stay at a very romantic cottage in the woods. It wasn't until we drove all the way out into the wilderness that I realized just how secluded the little holiday home was. But my girlfriend, Cindy, seemed quite pleased with it. As I was taking in the luggage, I noticed a snowman in front of the house. I didn't think much of it then. I thought it was a fitting decoration, with the classic top hat and carrot nose. Very seasonal. My girl and I settled right into the cozy digs and made dinner. We had planned for this whole retreat to be relaxing and romantic, but that entire meal was consumed in silence. A tense atmosphere hung over us, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Afterwards, I felt the long drive catch up to me with the sudden urge to test out the plumbing in the cottage toilet. There was no cell service out where we were, so I got bored just sitting there. That's when I noticed that there was a curtained window in the bathroom. Simply out of curiosity, I reached up and pulled back the curtain, and right there was the snowman, staring right at me. I closed the curtain and jumped to my feet, frantically pulling up my pants. That sight sent a jolt through me that cut my business short, no doubt about it. I rushed out and waddled up to the front door.
John, what's up?
I threw open the door and peered out into the frigid sunset snow. The snowman was still there, right where it was when we got there. It hadn't moved an inch.
John, close the door. It's cold.
I slammed the door and stormed back into the bathroom, yanking back the curtain. Nothing. I swear whoever's watching me is asking to get it! I stammered back into the main room in a heated state, when I finally remembered the whole purpose of the trip.
There's nobody watching us, John, honey. It's just you and me.
Later that night, we both laid out in bed, exhausted. Cindy had done her best to distract me from the snowman problem, but even after she'd been asleep for a couple of hours, I couldn't relax. That tense feeling was still churning. Outside, the winds were picking up, whistling through the trees and around the walls of the house. In all that noise, another sound invaded any remaining semblance of peace. A soft tapping on glass from a window somewhere in the building. A chill ran down my spine. Very quickly, it grew to the sound like a fist banging on the pane, about to burst through. I shot up out of bed so fast I almost woke Cindy. Following the sound to the living room, I could hear the ever-loudening banging coming from the window right by the door. I inched closer, afraid, but about to pull back the curtain, and that's when the whole window exploded under the pressure and cut up my face with a shower of glass shards. The howling wind rushed in from the broken window, blowing back the curtain, and standing right there on the porch, the snowman again, piercing me with his soulless button eyes. Didn't I tell you not to screw with me? Huh? Now look what I gotta do! I know you're not just a snowman, you peeping punk! The fury didn't subside with the snowman's destruction. I felt I was catching on to whatever was happening, and I was going to stop it. I stomped out barefoot, looking for the footprints of a prankster or a peeping Tom or somebody, but the moonlight revealed only fresh, undisturbed powder. Frustrated, I hobbled back inside on nearly frozen feet to wash the blood and glass from my face and maybe start up the fireplace and thaw out my souls. But, of course, the first thing I saw in the bathroom was that rotten snow freak staring right through the window. Didn't I just destroy you? Are my fists not good enough? Fine, I got something else for you. I'd seen it earlier, but I didn't think I'd use it for anything but chopping firewood. The rustic axe mounted above the fireplace. I plucked it from its resting place and took it in both hands, ready to go back outside and finish the job. But once I opened the door, I heard myself thinking with reason. No footprints. No footprints. Somebody's playing a game with me. This snowman is just a pawn. Yes, just a pawn. There can only be one culprit. Yes, only one person it could be. Oh, Cindy! I figured out that little joke you've been pulling on me. I walked back into the bedroom and stood over the sleepy Cindy, who was just starting to stir. She looked up at me with confused eyes, like she didn't know.
Huh? John? What are you... Hey! What are you doing?
I swung the axe down into her pretty chest with a surge of relief, putting my weary mind at ease. But her screaming was messing up my moment of zen, so I yanked it out of her ribcage and plunged it back in with all its heft again and again, until she finally shut up and stopped that horrible gurgling sound. Then, I thought, might as well be as thorough with you as I was with the snowman. So, I made sure to purge every shred of aggression in my heart. I'm not stupid! I don't like games! You shouldn't put me on edge! After a while, there wasn't much left of silly little Cindy. That, and the bed was starting to break. So, I started that fire I was thinking about earlier, and really got relaxing through the rest of my vacation. Looking back, even though she betrayed me, I do regret how I handled the situation. I was a little brash, but maybe next time I go on a cottage retreat, my new girlfriend will remember to pack my meds.
This all happened around Christmas time. I always looked forward to the holiday. I enjoyed all the decorations and exchanging gifts with family and friends. But ever since I moved out of my parents' place, there was a problem. I moved to a small home in a quiet area. Everyone in the neighborhood was fine except for one person. It was this psychotic woman named Mel who just so happened to be my next door neighbor. She made living in the neighborhood rather difficult. I could often hear her from my house. She would always scream and yell things like she was talking to someone, but she lived alone. I thought at first that she could just be on the phone with someone, but then I caught her talking to herself a few times. She'd be outside in the backyard or on her front porch, chattering away to herself. It wasn't anything normal either. She sounded like a deranged psycho. Sometimes, she would be so loud that it was even hard for me to sleep. She could go on for hours at a time, without seeming to stop for a breath. Then, out of nowhere, she would just go quiet. It was kind of creepy. I never knew what set her off. What was even weirder was that she would sometimes claw and scratch at my door like a dog. Then she would groan bizarrely and make a lot of other weird noises. It was all really freaky, but I would just ignore her until she eventually left. My friends told me that I should just call the cops, but I didn't want to do that. I felt pretty bad for Mel. She obviously had some sort of mental disability, and I was sympathetic because I had family members with the same issues. I also felt bad because she lived alone. No one ever seemed to come check up on her either. It was sad. At first, I started to get used to her. Then things began to get even more disturbing. Mel became completely obsessed with me. I don't even know how it happened, but she practically began stalking me. She would wait outside so that she could talk to me before I left for work. And then she would be in the same spot when I came back. Sometimes she would stay outside my door for hours at a time, like she was hoping that I would let her in. It made me really uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to do about it. At first, she was more shy, but then she started telling me that she was in love with me. It was practically every time that I saw her. I tried to tell her that I didn't feel the same way, but she didn't seem to care. I tried to avoid her as much as I could, but it was difficult with her living right next door. This went on for a while. Over the years, I continually tried to give Mel signs that I wasn't interested, but it didn't stop her from making advances. It was getting ridiculous. She gave me gifts for every holiday despite me never getting her anything. Valentine's Day, Christmas, my birthday, it was all the same. I didn't want to accept any of them, but I didn't want to be rude. It was all way too awkward. I really didn't want anything to do with her, but I was afraid that she would snap if I told her. I never actually opened any of the gifts though. I just threw them in a closet. I didn't want to find out what kind of gifts Mel had picked out. I basically hated being at home due to Mel. She was always so unpredictable. I never felt like I could have anyone over because I was too scared that she'd interfere. I never knew what to expect when I came home from work. It was a bad situation, but it eventually got even worse. On Christmas Eve, the night just before Christmas, I was sleeping peacefully in my room when something woke me up. It was around 3 a.m. when I realized that it was Mel's weird groaning and scratching noises at the front door. This was really disturbing since it was so late. Mel had never come to my door in the middle of the night before. She had to be having another episode. I didn't want to call the cops on her, but I was annoyed as hell. It was way too late to put up with her shit. I went downstairs to open the door, and sure enough, Mel was standing right there. She looked creepy as hell. It freaked me out. Mel then offered me some Christmas gifts, holding them out in each hand. She had a raunchy calendar in one hand and a pair of shoes in the other. I got even more annoyed then and told her that I didn't want her presents.
What the hell is wrong with you? It's 3 in the morning!
Mel stared at me in disbelief for a second, and then she got really upset and tossed the gifts in my face. She then ran back to her house, crying hysterically. I felt bad, but I was fed up with her guilt-tripping me all the time even if she was disabled. I locked the door and headed back to bed, glad that it was over quickly. But as I walked towards the stairs, I suddenly saw Mel crawling in through my kitchen window. She fell through the window onto the floor and stumbled to her feet. She then pulled out a knife and started charging at me. I ran upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. I was terrified. She had completely snapped. But suddenly I realized there was something wrong. The bedroom door had no lock. And I realized this just before Mel came slamming into it. I threw my body up against the door and pushed back as hard as I could. She then started stabbing a knife through the door repeatedly as I backed off just in time. I held the door shut for as long as I could, but she eventually broke it down. I fell to the floor as she stood in the doorway, holding the knife over my head.
Please, don't! Please!
On December 25th of 2013, a woman named Melissa Young was jailed for life after being found guilty of the murder of her neighbor on Christmas Day. The victim's name was Alan Williamson. Melissa claimed that she allegedly saw a bright light and heard voices in her head before she flipped and did what she did. The motive for the woman's attack was because Alan had allegedly rejected her Christmas present of a pair of unisex trainers and a copy of the Sun's newspaper's 2014 calendar. Melissa has mentioned that if Alan had accepted the gifts from her, she would not have attacked him.
The next story took place a few winters ago. When I was a young teenager, I was going through the phase where I really wasn't getting along with my family. I preferred spending time with my friends and always getting up to trouble. The holidays were definitely a tense time with all that going on. I couldn't stand seeing my parents, so of course I did everything I could to get out of going with them on some dragged out holiday vacation.
Where are you going? You should be getting ready for the trip.
I don't want to go on this stupid trip. I'll be back later.
No, you won't! You're gonna stay and you're gonna pack up!
I'll do it later. My friends are waiting on me.
Well, if you're gonna choose those dirty lowlives over family, then we'll just leave without you!
Then leave!
I should have left you in the dumpster and not in your mother!
Instead of getting ready for the big trip, I wanted to go to my friend's spot in the woods, where there was a cool old treehouse we'd all hang out at. After I got into it with my dad, I decided I wanted to stay out all night, which my friends were happy to hear after thinking I was going to be gone for the holidays. Well, fast forward another few hours and I was going belligerent by drinking from our so-called soda bottles in the safety of the treehouse. I don't recall much at all about what occurred during that night, except chatting with this attractive girl named Stephanie. But other than being able to barely comprehend my surroundings, I did, however, remember passing out and waking up right next to her and a couple other people on the floor of the treehouse. As soon as I opened my eyes, I could tell that I'd slept way later than I had anticipated. All of a sudden, I came to my senses and rushed home, hoping that I hadn't actually been left there home alone. Unfortunately, I knew by the lack of cars in the driveway that they really had left without me. That's when I came to the realization that I stupidly thought to never bring my key when I stormed off that day before. I checked the front door, back door, and even tried prying the side windows open, but everything was locked shut. I was cold, hungry, and hungover. I started freaking out and then used a rock to break through the kitchen window by the back door so I could reach around and unlock the door into the house. Once inside, I did what I could to clean up the glass, but there was no replacing the door window. Instead, I sealed it off with duct tape, just so there wouldn't be too bad of a draft. A few minutes later, I called my mom to chew her out for leaving me behind. How could you leave me home alone? What kind of mother are you?
What kind of mother am I? What kind of son are you?
You probably had me with some random guy, and that's why you and Dad hate me.
You will not talk to me like that, young man.
Then I won't talk to you, you hoe. When that didn't go well, I tried calling up that girl I passed out with, but that was a bust too. She said she couldn't hang out until after she got back from the holidays with her family. That's when I came to the realization that I was going to be by myself for Christmas, completely alone, in a big house with no one around. By 10 p.m., I was an emotional wreck, so I crawled into bed and tried to get some sleep. It was barely 10 minutes later when I started hearing loud noises coming from the kitchen downstairs. I snuck out of bed and peeked down the stairs, and there I saw two men standing menacingly in my kitchen. And that's when I made the dumbest mistake of my life. I screamed at the top of my lungs out of sheer panic, and that's when the robbers immediately looked at me. I turned around and ran back to my room and locked the door. I panicked and called my mom. She made me wait until the last ring. I was just about to give up and call the cops, but she had just answered when the robbers broke down my door and charged into my room. Right away, one of them ran at me, picked me up, and tossed me on the bed like I was made of air, just to show me I stood no chance against them. Then, it was all just screaming. Hey kid, where's the money at? Yeah kid, come on. Where did they keep the jewelry, huh? Spit it out. I don't know. Please help me, mommy. Look at him, calling for his mommy. You better dry up. We ain't even started hooking you up to car batteries yet. Hey, shut up. Look at this. He's on the phone with her right now. Isn't that nice?
What's going on? Who's there? Who are you, and what are you doing with my son?
Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Crybaby. Your wimpy little son is just fine, and he'll stay that way if you tell us the combination to your safe and where to find it.
What are you talking about? We don't have a safe.
That's baloney. Shut up. Forget the safe. Where's your money? Your jewels. If you don't tell us, then your son's gonna pay for it.
I'm telling you, we're not that rich. We don't have a safe or jewels or anything like that.
Please, believe her. Believe her. Shut up. You know what, kid? I say we ought to make him scream so his mommy can hear. Forget that hoe. She's dumb as rocks. We can't keep wasting time. We gotta make a move. Fast. Now. All right, wise guy. What should we do? I think she's bluffing. Let's ransom the kid. What? No, please. I'll do anything. Shut up. The next thing I knew, they put duct tape over my mouth and dragged me out of the room. I screamed and fought back against them, but they carried me down the stairs with one of them holding me by the legs and the other by the arms, and there was no way I could get out of their grip. And then, to my relief, I heard police sirens approaching my house until they were basically right outside. The two robbers then threw me down on the couch, and I wasn't able to see much of what happened, but I heard the robbers try to escape out the back door, only to be cut off by cops and arrested. kid. For a while, I thought it was my mom who called the cops, but I didn't understand how they could have responded so quickly. As it turns out, it was the girl who called them. The girl that I met at the treehouse who gave me her number. She recently moved in just a few doors down from me and said when she heard some strange noises outside and went to investigate, she saw the two men snooping around my backyard and called the cops right away. Man, if things had gone differently, I might have wifed her.
Everyone has stories about how crazy their relatives are, but I think mine might be one of the worst. It happened when I was younger, still in my early teens. I think about it sometimes, and it still scares me to this day. It happened around Christmas time. My family would always invite a bunch of people over for the holidays. It wouldn't just be for one day either. Friends and relatives would be in and out of the house for the entire month of December. It made it pretty hectic, but I enjoyed it. I liked seeing everyone. But there was this one woman that I had never been fond of. She was my mom's friend. I don't know how they had met, but they had known each other for years. My mom treated her like family and invited her over for the holidays just like everyone else. The problem was she was a little crazy. She had never been that nice to me. She would always pick on me because I was the youngest in the family. She would always make me the butt end of every joke and treated me like I was a little kid who didn't understand anything. It was frustrating, but I just ignored it. I figured I couldn't like all of my mom's friends. Then, over the years, it got a lot worse. She started to lose her mind and began to act completely psycho, like she had a mental condition. That's when her treatment of me went from annoying to scary. It was like she had a thing for me or something. She would still pick on me like always, but it felt different somehow. There was another level to it that made me feel uneasy. She would always single me out in the conversation and say the strangest things, too. I would catch her staring at me from across the room. She didn't even try to look away when I caught her doing it. It was really creepy. It got worse and worse as time went on. I started to miss the earlier days of her picking on me. At least then it wasn't so creepy and strange. I felt so uncomfortable around her. But my mom kept inviting her over and spending time with her. I didn't understand it because she would yell at my mom all the time. One second they would be having a normal conversation and then suddenly she would blow up over nothing. It was crazy. She would lash out at my mom over the phone too. I told my mom to forget about her, but my mom said we have to have sympathy because she was most likely bipolar. I didn't get it. I just wanted the woman to be out of our lives. But she continued to mess with me out of everyone else. She would always act insane, but she acted even worse towards me. It got to the point where I would dread the holidays because I knew she would be coming over. She basically ruined every party or event she was invited to. The other relatives even asked my mom to stop inviting her, but my mom refused. She had a weird soft spot for the woman. Every time the woman came for events like Thanksgiving or Christmas, she would act out and yell like a psycho. It didn't matter who it was directed at. Sometimes she would just scream at a wall. Of course, if I was in the room, she would normally yell at me. It always came in weird fits. One second she would be quiet and then she would blow up. Sometimes she would suddenly space out and stand perfectly still. That honestly freaked me out more than the yelling. It was very unsettling to see her just staring at nothing. When she wasn't in one of her screaming or staring fits, she would spend her time tormenting me in other ways. She would try to intentionally scare me by hiding behind something and then jumping out at me. Usually it would work too, especially when I was younger. Whenever she got me with one of her weird jokes, she would laugh about it forever. She sounded like a total psycho when she did. That was the part I hated most of all. Her laugh sent chills down my spine. So that's what I had to look forward to around the holidays. But then one particular year, it reached a whole new level. Whenever my family hosted Christmas, they liked to have people exchange gifts. Everyone would gather in one room and then would go around and take turns opening stuff. It was always really fun. That particular year, though, the woman got me a present. Everyone was handing out their gifts and enjoying themselves when suddenly, the woman walked over to me smiling widely and holding a present. She never got anyone gifts, so it was very strange to see she had brought me anything. I had no idea what it could be, but I was very uncomfortable to think that she had gotten me something. The box was pretty big too, and it felt heavy. She stared at me eagerly and urged me to open it. I reluctantly set it down and started tearing off the paper. Then I opened the lid, and what I saw was the most disturbing, horrific thing I had ever laid eyes on. There was a dead dog inside the box. She gave me a dead dog as a gift. She immediately started laughing with that same psychotic laugh while everyone else screamed. It was terrifying. I felt sick to my stomach and pushed through the box away from me. She just continued to laugh more and more, sending chills down my spine. Since that day, my parents have banned her from coming to any family events. We're all completely scarred from the ordeal. My mom still gets calls from the woman every now and then. She would leave disturbing voicemails asking how we're enjoying the dog. This story was inspired by a fan-submitted story revolving around a woman who allegedly gifted a dead dog to their family for Christmas. No one really knows the interior motive on why the woman would do such a thing, but from what the victim claims, it was most likely done out of sheer spite and jealousy. The victim hasn't heard of any updates from the woman since, but claims he's still traumatized as he's reminded of it every Christmas. Santa Claus is a fat, phony fraud. I know it. You know it. Everybody knows it. The big difference between you and me is that I had the guts to go and prove it. All these non-player characters in society masquerading as thinking human beings, just believing the ridiculous narrative that's been fed to them. That some obese man breaks into their house every year and gives them useless junk. Any logical person with his legendary power would just rob the whole world blind. It's absolutely shameful that parents indoctrinate their children into this farce in this modern day. No wonder we can't face our existential threats. We're too caught up in fairy tales like Santa Claus. But I'm here to put an end to this, once and for all. Just this last year, I have eyewitness indisputable proof that there is no man or being Santa Claus, but that the myth of the overweight home invader is perpetuated by an unspoken society of Santa Claus imposters. I've been trying to catch my local agent of the conspiracy for years, camping out on the living room couch every Christmas Eve, but every night passing out from the boredom, or maybe the chemtrails, seemingly moments before his arrival. Each time he slipped away, my curiosity burned hotter. 365 days is a lot of time, but that's how long I had to wait every time I screwed up. So, I learned to be prepared. To finally catch him, I trekked out into the snow and bought 2 highly caffeinated energy drinks and chugged them before bedtime. That would keep me awake, but I knew it wouldn't be enough proof just to see him. I think I had a pretty ingenious solution to this problem with a quick purchase on the dark web a few weeks prior. Every night before Christmas, my mother would bake cookies, and my father would make sure to tell me,
"Hey, son, don't forget to set out some milk and cookies for Santa. It's the eldest child's duty to Christmas."
"Yes, Father." And this year, I made sure to set everything out after everyone else had already gone to bed, to make sure it was nice and fresh for him. If Santa Claus wants some milk and cookies, he can have the best there is around. It's the perfect bait for the glutton. By 11 o'clock, I was positioned on the couch next to the fireplace with my eyes closed, faking sleep like a pro despite all the caffeine coursing through my veins. After what felt like hours of waiting in a deep meditative state, I finally heard him making his way into the house like a bull in a china closet. But when I opened my eyes, he wasn't standing at the hearth. He was already at the Christmas tree, down on one knee and laying out presents.
"Hey, how'd you get in here?" Oh! Or should I say, ho ho ho! What are you doing up so late?
"Who are you and how did you get in my house?"
"Why, I'm Santa Claus, young man, and I came in through the chimney. How else would I get in?"
"You're the St. Nicholas."
"Of course I am, son. I came with all the presents you and your little brother wished for."
"Well then, my apologies. Just don't forget your milk and cookies, Santa."
"Oh, thank you, kiddo. That's very sweet of you."
As he waddled over to the end table with the midnight snack, I didn't take my eyes off him for a moment. I wanted to absorb every detail of this sighting. The way he crammed those sugar bombs into his gullet with all the crumbs falling into his tangled mess of a beard, and the downright wasteful speed with which he chugged the entire tall glass of milk. Disgusting. After he finished his diabetic binge, he didn't look me in the eye. He just stumbled back to the tree to set out the rest of the presents, and started on his way out through the fireplace.
"I guess I'd
better be going by now. Lots of other houses to... My plan was working perfectly. I was just about to crack the big lie. Son, what was in that... He collapsed to the floor with a huge thud, just as I uncovered the identity of the imposter. I knew that voice, and I should have known it earlier. It was my father. My mother and my little brother both awoke to the startling sound of his fall. They rushed out of their rooms and looked on in horror, like their entire worlds had been shattered.
My boy, what have you done?
My little brother started bawling, but my mother wasn't there for him. She rushed to my father's aid, but it was too late. It was a pitiful sight, really. I admit, I had to take drastic measures to uncover the truth of the Santa Claus conspiracy. But even after all the sacrifices I've made, my resolve is still strong, because I know that it was all in the honest pursuit of truth.